we tying, yeah?
Right, we're tying a Claret Dabbler. Righto, as before when I was talking about loch style fishing and fly design and all that sort of thing, like I said before, never had a creative design of my own that's ever been any good, but I'm pretty good at plagiarising other people's flies. Same with the Claret Dabbler. It sort of came out of that real interest in loch style fishing, which came about from the very first fly fishing championships, Tasmanian fly fishing championships, which Malcolm would remember very well. The first one of those was on Little Pine Lagoon, and they were 6-hour sessions, and none of us knew anything about loch style fishing really much at all, nor how to do it. And we were, during the briefing, we were all quite dismayed that we'd have to sit down and fish, which was not in the normal Tasmanian way of doing it. So we had these boards which went across the boats, and I met some lifelong friends out of that, and I spent 6 hours of that first session on Little Pine Lagoon with young fella you might have heard of called Trevor Byrne. Righto, Claret Dabbler. So the tail is claret pheasant tail. Tie this in quite long, because this is a fly that works in the surface tension of the water. So it has a long tail, more not so much for its visual requirements, but just to keep it in the surface, so it's like a keel almost. So I'll tie that in quite long. Trout can't count, so it probably doesn't matter how many fibres you've got in there, but about that many. It has a rib of copper wire, and it's a palmed hackle fly, so it's slightly complicated, but if you take the steps just nice and gently, it's not that bad. And just remember with dubbing and this sort of thing, with a palmed fly, less is more. So the body is claret. Everything's pretty much claret about this fly. So I like claret seal's fur. It's a fly that works best in the surface. It's a water pusher. The way the wing is tied on, which I'll show you later, really makes the fly work so effectively. Works best in those places where the trout are used to things hatching in the surface. So this was the key, the number one wet fly, top dropper fly in Arthur's Lake, until John Horsey came, which again was another initiative of Malcolm's. Good you're here, Malcolm. Still is?
They've gone to
They've gone, righto. Anyway, now I can talk about him. So when John Horsey came, John brought that dry fly revolution, as we call it. I fished one day with John Horsey in on Arthur's Lake, and he was trying to get me to fish dries, and these fish just kept boiling every now and again. So I just kept catching them on Claret Dabblers. And in the end he said, I'm going to chop that thing off and throw it away if you don't start doing something different. Anyway, so the body, nice and scruffy claret body, palmed hackle, so as we did with the woolly worm, we're going to tie it in at the front. Now with the head of the fly with the Claret Dabbler, there's a lot going to happen at that head, so leave yourself plenty of room. Looks like I've tied that really short, but there's a lot going to happen in that space, so we just need to make sure we don't crowd the eye. If there's one thing you need to watch out for with this fly, it's just that you don't end up crowding too much. So again with that palmed hackle, just nice, probably more open turns than what I've just done. Because this fly is all about that claret colour, but it is all about pushing water as well. It's got to make that real disturbance. And again, don't get too precious if you strap down a couple of hackle fibres. It doesn't matter. This is just to stop it from coming to pieces after you've caught the 30th fish for the day. Everyone's used to catching 30 fish a day. Don't think I've ever caught 30. Oh, I have once. I caught 32 fish in a little creek up the northeast. And I'll show you that fly in a little while too. Righto, so there we go. So you can get rid of that down the back. Memory's improving because I haven't forgotten anything yet. And get rid of the copper. Right, so there we go. You could actually tie that on and catch fish on that straight away. But what we're trying to do now, this is where it gets a bit fiddly. So it's called the Claret Dabbler, but the key thing to it is this bronze mallard wing. So if you think about a fly like a mallard and claret, what we're trying to do with this brown feather is get a wing that goes all the way around. Now, this can be a bit fiddly. Typically what I'll do, and try and get the darkest, that nice brown tealy colour, I just hold it in my fingers and just chop it so it's like that. And then really just trying to get it so it goes over the hook like that, just longer rather than shorter. And you put it in 2 or 3 different times. You can see what I mean about, if you're not careful, you can crowd out that eye of the hook.
So you're almost trying to spin that a little bit around the hook reel as you tie that in?
Yeah, if it'll spin for you. Sometimes you've got to swear at it a fair bit. But ultimately all you want is that cone shape, so that when you start to pull it, it pushes water in the surface. Is that beeping a good thing or a bad thing?
It's a random thing.
Random.
Pacemaker, the battery's going flat.
Don't say that, I've got one of those. And then again on that other side, so just a loose wrap and then pull it like that. It is a frustrating fly to tie. With those bits that have come out the front like that, you can either trim them off. If they're brown, you can fold them back and it looks all right. If they're grey like that, I'll get rid of most of them. This is usually when you cut thread. Oh, I thought I was going to then too. And just use your fingernails just to make sure you've got it. And then you're out of jail. And give it a decent head. How's that look, John?
Beautiful.
How's it look, not how I look.
Just doesn't get old, does it?
It's the gift that keeps on giving today, isn't it? There we go, Claret Dabbler. Don't worry if it looks scruffy. Sorry?
What length to tie that?
Bloody good question. A size 10.
175?
Yep, or 170 or 175. If it's a really windy day, you want it on a really heavy hook. So when I used to get really excited about loch style fishing, I'd have 20 of these tied on different weight hooks. I never used to weight the hook itself, but I'd have them on B175s right down to my other favourite hook, which is a B405, which I tie lots of dry flies on for rivers, just to give it that little bit of weight. Sometimes when you're loch style fishing, particularly on a day like this, the wind will pull it out of the water, so it'll hit your leader and just rip it out of the water. Typically, if there's a fish on the hunt on your fly and it flips out of the water and comes back in, they won't have it.
No,
They just
don't like it.
they just crack the shits and turn away.